Hello and welcome to our last lesson of Key Question 6, Life After War, for Depression, War and Recovery, 1930 to 1951. Today what we're going to be looking at is reasons for the Labour victory in 1945. So we're going to be looking at reasons that the Labour Party won the general election in 1945. So a little bit of background to start. There hadn't been an election since 1945 in 10 years because of the Second World War. Now what had happened during the Second World War is there'd been a coalition government that had been a mix with Winston Churchill at the helm obviously, but there'd been a mix of Labour and Conservative and Liberal politicians in government. They'd made a coalition to try and get them through the war. So then they held an election then on the 5th of July 1945. Voting closed on the 19th of July, so a very long election window, voting window to allow enough time for soldiers stationed abroad to vote so they could send their votes. And the two leading parties were Clement Attlee's Labour Party and Winston Churchill's Conservative Party. The Liberal Party were in decline at this stage. Out of about 33 million eligible voters, 24 million voted. That is a massive amount. That's a big percentage of the electorate that were voted. I don't think there'd been one with that many people voting before. There was still a bit of a fear of Labour's socialist policies. People weren't quite sure about what the direction that Labour wanted to go. They were still a little bit fearful of communism. And because of this, the election result was a huge surprise to a lot of people. Winston Churchill was a really successful wartime leader and a hero in some people's minds. Clearly, many observers would have fancied a Churchill victory because of his war role, because he'd gotten the country through the Second World War. However, Labour secured a landslide victory. Okay. So why do you think Labour won? I want you to have a read of the two manifestos. These are the main points from the manifestos. So a manifesto is something that a political party will write to try and convince people to vote for them, basically saying what we will do when we get into power. I want you to have a little look at both sides, have a little read of that screen, and tell me then, write a couple of notes down as to why you think the Labour Party won. What about the Labour Party's manifesto appealed to the masses more so than the Conservative Party? So you can see the titles there: Mr. Churchill's Declaration of Policy to the Electors. Let Us Face the Future, though, was the name of the Labour Party one. The main policies of the Conservative Party: comprehensive insurance scheme, National Health Service, education improvements, housing improvements. The Labour Party's main points: comprehensive insurance scheme as well, and National Health Service set up immediately, full employment, education improvements, housing improvements, nationalising the Bank of England and power, transport, iron and steel to be carried out immediately. This policy would probably guarantee many jobs. And what people commented on it. So the Conservative Manifesto highlighted the need for continuity under Churchill. We need Churchill to get us through this. We need to continue with him. He's done a good job so far. Let him carry on. Though Churchill spoke of a clear plan, it seemed as if many of his policies were hopes, not a definite. The Labour Party, though, the Labour Manifesto stressed planning, reconstruction and equality, all policies that people had come to recognise during the war. Labour's campaign did not mention any personalities at all, so whereas the Conservatives really focused on Churchill, Labour didn't do this. And it showed it would implement the Beveridge Report, which we'll look at later on, more quickly than the Conservatives. It put forward the idea of never again, which could be interpreted in a few different ways. For instance, obviously, never again do we want to go to war and suffer because of that, but also never again do we want the Depression of the 30s. And of course, it had been a Conservative government that was in power during the Depression years as well. What you've got to remember as well is this is a time of class mobility. People are starting to try and pull themselves out of the working class, unlike in the 30s when the class systems were sort of stuck. The rich had a lot, the poor had nothing. The working classes were starting to realise that if they worked, they could get what they wanted. They could move themselves. They could make more money for themselves. They deserved to be treated just as well as the upper classes did. Okay, so why do you think then Labour won? So think about that and I'll make some notes. Why do you think, looking at their manifestos, why do you think the majority of people voted for Labour? So the results actually were, as I've said before, were a landslide victory for Labour. You can see they get 48.1% of the votes cast, while the Conservatives get 4%. They go up 10%. They get 10% more seats than they did in the last election, and the Conservative go minus 13.9%. They lose 13.9% of their seats. Okay, so Labour comfortably, very, very comfortably win. So reasons that they won. Now what I want you to do, this sheet is attached to this lesson, I want you to read through these and I want you to highlight and sort the reasons into Labour strengths and Conservative failures. So you'll have it end up with an, on the one hand, Labour won because of its strengths, on the other hand, they won because of the Conservative failures. So split them into Labour strengths and Conservative failures. I suggest that you pause the video for me and do that now. Okay, using that information now, what I want you to do is have a little go at this essay question. Okay, so read the interpretation below and then answer the question which follows. By the end of World War II, the British public were crying out for change. Labour would lead that change. Our manifesto, Let Us Face the Future, laid out a bold vision, pledging to destroy the 5 evil giants such as want, disease and unemployment. It was a message which captured the imagination of the country and took Clement Attlee into number 10. Now that's an extract from an article in the 1945 general election and it's published on the Labour Party's official website in 2015. How far do you agree with this interpretation of reasons why the Labour Party won the general election? Now what you're going to need to answer this are these reasons here. Okay, but there is a specific way that you answer this question. Okay, so this is the biggest mark. If you get 19 out of 19 in this, you are flying. You have done really well already. Okay, and it is really easy to do so. Now, the way that we answer this question is an on the one hand and on the other hand. Okay, so you're going to say on the one hand, I agree with this and this is because. So you agree that these are the reasons that Labour won, and I would suggest that you look at Labour's strengths to back up what you're saying. Then I want you to have a look at the benefits of the attribution. Now this is really, really important. So many people forget to do this. Now you cannot get higher if you look at analyses and evaluates how and why the interpretations of this issue differ, some understanding of the historical debate, appropriate reference made to the authorship. If you don't analyse it and you don't do date, author, tone and audience on it, you are stuck by here. You're stuck at 4. Okay, that's not what we want. So you're going to say on the one hand, yes, I agree. This is the reason Labour won. And these are the strengths. And you're going to pull them out of here. And then you're going to tell me the benefits of this, of the attributions. So published in 2015, it's got lots of benefit of hindsight. It's on it's from an extract from the Times, so it's quite informative. Okay, you know, pull out bits of facts that you know that you've that you've got from this. Okay, and then you're going to say on the other hand, it could be argued that it was the Conservative weaknesses that were the reason for Labour's win. And you're going to pull out the Conservative failures from this and you're going to write about these. Then what you're going to do is you're going to talk about the limits of this. So you can say things like it's from the Labour Party's official website in 2015. So it's biased because it's from the Labour Party's website. There was actually an election in 2015. So it's quite important to know that because they're trying to win votes, okay, which could make it a little less reliable as well, okay. Again, it is the official website, but again, it could be biased because it's published on the Labour website. Okay, it is specific. You could say to the general election in 1945, going back, sorry, to the strengths. It is specific, but again, it's a tiny little extract from a bigger picture. So you'd be thinking about that as well. So the way that you do this, yes, on the one hand, yes, I agree with it, and this is why. It's a reliable piece of evidence because, and you go through date, author, tone, and audience. On the other hand, I don't agree with it, and this is why, and you give my reasons. And then you look at the limitations of the attribution, and you say date, author, tone, and audience, and why there's limits to it. And then, conclusion, just one sentence, do you agree with it or do you not? Overall, it is my opinion that the Labour Party won the general election in 1945 because, to finish off, okay? In the backs of your books, you do have a how to answer the question with some sentence starters for you, but I would like you to have a go at that. Once you're done, you can have a look at the mark scheme and give yourself a mark, okay? And then we are finished. Thank you very much.